Since the first stories came out about Harvey Weinstein's sexual assault allegations have rocked Hollywood, and now many other industries are starting to look inward. In the restaurant business, where some kitchens have long had a reputation for being raunchy at best, it's no surprise harassment exists. But you might be surprised just how common it is. 2014 study by the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United found that 80% of people in the restaurant industry reported being sexually harassed by coworkers. 2/3 reported harassment from managers. The same report also found the food industry to be the single largest source of sexual harassment claims in the United States, like those made against New Orleans restaurateur John Besh last month, who was forced to step down from the company he co-founded. Todd English, who owns several popular restaurants in Boston, was recently accused of harassing a server at his restaurant in New York. Both have denied the accusations. I'm joined now by three restaurateurs to discuss. Joanne Chang, 2016 James Beard Award-winning co-owner of Flower Bakery and Myers & Chang, and the author of the Myers & Chang at Home Cookbook. Nice to see you, Joanne. Sweet Cheeks Barbecue and Tiger Mama owner and chef Tiffani Faison, who you may know from Top Chef. Good to see you, Tiffani. And Cherry Bombe co-founder Kerry, who co-owns 4 restaurants in New York City and is just out with her cookbook, the Cherry Bombe Cookbook. Kerry, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Here's the headline a couple of days ago in the Boston Globe, at least 2 of you saw. From coat check to kitchen, Boston restaurants are rife with sexual harassment. Is that an accurate picture, Joanne Chang?
Yes. I was actually surprised that the article didn't go more in depth. It seemed very vanilla to me.
You nodding your head in agreement?
I think it was probably a first pitch, honestly.
Meaning there's so much more?
I think there's so much more to come.
New York City? Could we have the same headline?
I would imagine, yes, sadly.
So let's get, when both of you are saying it's just the tip of the proverbial iceberg, what's the point you're trying to make? That it's so widespread, or what are you saying?
I think it's such a part of kitchen culture that we're immune to it, honestly. Because when this first came out, I thought to myself, I don't know what they're talking about. Nothing's happening. And then I realized everything that happens, I'm just so used to it that it doesn't register as being wrong.
And is it so much part of kitchen culture because most kitchen culture is male dominated, because there's so much alcohol? Why is it part of that culture?
I think that has something to do with it. I think that boys grow up to be men, and if they're not guided and told that this is not appropriate, then they continue behavior that they did when they were young
But
boys.
It's worse in your industry with men than virtually everywhere. If those, why? Well,
it's true. I mean, I think it's rampant in every industry. I really do. But I think there's several components about our industry specifically, the physicality of it, the long hours that seem to excuse bad behavior. It's like working in a sports team when you're working in a kitchen. And so I think a lot of those same behaviors sort of start to kick in. And if you're, throw a woman on a basketball team, as talented as she may be, it changes the dynamic. And I think in a lot of ways that creates insecurity, that creates fear. Certainly not excusing it because of those reasons, but then there's behavior that becomes inclusive. It's inclusive when it's just men, and then it becomes really offensive when there's a woman in the situation.
I know both of you have worked in restaurants a long time before you became owners. You did too?
No, I was in journalism.
Oh, you were before. So
Yes.
are you a Me Tooer, or is this all
I don't know
external to you?
I don't know any woman who's not a Me Tooer. I think my
You don't know
experience.
any woman who is not a Me Tooer?
No.
In the restaurant industry or
in general,
across the board?
In general. I mean, everyone, I think we can all agree, every woman we know has been harassed in some way, shape, or form. I think another part we're not talking about is what happens front of house. And my experience as a restaurateur has not been being harassed in the kitchen, but being harassed by male guests. And that's a big problem that we haven't even started to talk about, and how our front of house teams
Well, what's
deal
that
with
like?
that.
Because they basically see you as their servants, essentially, or what is it?
There's that. It's a whole slew of behavior, and I think it goes back to what Joanne said. It's how are men.
People treated each other as
Exactly.
kids, and then but they don't get taught that you don't do that once you're an adult.
But I
Have
think
you
also-
experienced it?
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean, oh, yeah? I mean,
Yes. I
you
mean,
have-
look, and it's interesting that we're all talking about it now, and I give myself a lot of grief about why haven't I talked about it before, and why haven't I felt more free? I am a woman married to a woman that does not have a man as a boss, so why am I so afraid to talk about it, even still? Because, and I think it's the same thing dealing with front of the house guests. In restaurants specifically, our currency is likability. For women to succeed in any industry, specifically this industry, when you're cooking, when you're front of the house, for guests who want to come into our restaurants, likability is a huge part of our currency, and so that's antipathy of likability, is to stand up and say, this won't fly.
I want to get back to your question, which is, to me, a critical one. Why don't we do more than we do? But I want to extend this customer thing for a minute. I was in a restaurant here, I don't know, 3 months ago, before this all broke. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but it is what it is. And I heard somebody at the next table say they wanted a woman server. And I thought, well, that's odd, but... And then I said to myself, I never thought of it until I started reading a couple of weeks ago about the restaurant industry, hearing that men often request women servers, not for any decent reason. Is that so? Are customers as bad as Kerry's suggesting here? I don't mean all of them, obviously.
Of course, not all of them. I mean, I don't typically work front of the house, so I don't have firsthand experience. But
But you've worked at every level of restaurant.
And I think what you said earlier, that you're in a servant position, you're serving, and I think a lot of people take advantage, both men and women, but definitely if you're a male patron and you have a female server, there are a lot of men who take advantage of that.
You know, getting back to what you said a minute ago, Anthony Bourdain was with us yesterday, and I quoted the line from Quentin Tarantino a couple of weeks ago about Harvey Weinstein and asked him if he could say the same thing. Here's the question and Anthony's answer. Did you know enough to do more than you did?
Sure. I think, a lot of us, particularly, it's been 18 years since I've been in the restaurant industry, but I spent 30 in it, are asking themselves, to what extent were we complicit?
Like everybody else in this country, I spent a piece of my time thinking about this in terms of the perpetrators. And then a piece of the time talking about victims or survivors. But this is the question that you raised that I am now obsessed with, is why did decent people stand by and admit I knew enough to do more and not do more? Why?
I think one of you said it. It's like we just got to the point where being harassed was almost like breathing.
It's like normal.
We all breathe. It became normal.
And if you saw a coworker... you were a journalist.
We've fired people. We've certainly taken action when we've seen it. But I think it's a lot of the small aggressions that we sort of cast a blind eye toward. People having affairs, things that we knew weren't quite right, but maybe weren't our business, or it just wasn't a culture where we felt free to speak up yet.
There's a level of exhaustion to it. Like, if it's the smaller aggressions, someone's affair that's not really your business, like, maybe it's consensual, and then, it's happening with another manager that this person works with. Oh, it's happening with another man. And then at some point, why is there... It's hard to answer. I think there's exhaustion. I think there's a level of responsibility. And to go back and answer the question really quickly about guests and also people that work for us, and I think Joanne will probably have my back when I say this, I find that people do not come to work for me. I'm sure Joanne is the same. And guests do not typically come to my restaurants looking for that type of environment.
Speaking of that, you have an environment that is run by a woman. This is almost a ridiculous question to ask 3 women about their own businesses. That is part of the cure, is it not? I would assume you would all agree. I hate to ask a leading question. Is it fair to say less of this happens? Look at the look on your face. Does less of this happen in a woman-owned business?
Well,
you can't just say yes to that?
Well, no, because I think we're forgetting a few things. It's the solution's not just to have female-run kitchens.
Well, obviously you can't have all female, right?
Well, you can.
Well, you could. That's a good point.
But the solution is to be having this conversation and understand why people act like this. And it's not just men.
Right.
We know there are women who do this as well, and men do it to each other. There's this, I didn't know about this bizarre thing that goes on in kitchens, I don't know, can you say this, like all this grab-ass behavior that goes on between guys, and not every guy is into that behavior.
Right.
So the solution's not just female-run kitchens, even though that's what we sort of...
But essentially public education, public discussion. We only have a minute left. Is that it? If it isn't run by a woman, is that the solution?
No, that's ridiculous.
So what is the solution?
The solution is that we all start having conversations, and that the men that are running kitchens get really honest and square with whether or not their behavior is coinciding with who they believe they are as a human.
Exactly.
Well, maybe they believe they are as a human exactly the guy who's grabbing that ass, to use...
I don't think that's the case.
How about you? End it.
I know that at the businesses I run, we have a we do not tolerate sexual harassment. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
It is existing in my kitchens right now. And as soon as I hear about it, we do something about it. But it keeps happening. And until we have these conversations and until it becomes something that you cannot accept, it's going to continue.
Joanne, good to see you. I'm glad we had the conversation.
Nice to see
Tiffani,
you.
thanks.
Really nice to
Kerry, it's
see
good
you.
to meet you. Thanks so much.
Same.
We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.